Hey guys, welcome to the 360 View. Today we have a very interesting panel discussing immersive media, namely VR, AR, and 360 video, and its ability to reach audiences and captivate them. I'm Jose Frias. I'm the head of production at Chapter 4. We're a production company that specializes in immersive content, and I will be the moderator for today's panel. I'd like to start by giving special thanks to Aubrey Russell and the team at LiveX for putting this panel together, and obviously to our exceptional panelists for being here today. So we will start by asking the very simple question is, what is your name, your title and company, and if you will humor me briefly, what your first VR experience was as a consumer.
My name is James Payne. I'm the head of production at Stringr. Stringr is a video platform that helps companies gather and create all sorts of different content. My first VR experience, I can't remember exactly, but I want to say it was something about the war in Aleppo. It's just really immersive and eye-opening to see the whole the battlegrounds and the destroyed buildings, and I believe that was my first experience with VR.
Nice.
Nemeth, President of FlightLine Films. We do aerospace production and engineering, and we also do VR and 360 production for music and different events. My first VR experience was probably at a trade show. I don't really remember, but I do recall my first VR experience with Google Cardboard was watching, I think John produced it, it was the, the U2?
Oh yeah.
I think it was the U2 music video, where it was like in quadrants.
Yeah, I remember this, yes.
Yeah, I think that's the first thing that I actually, in the comfort of my living room, experienced.
And I'm Scott Gillies. I'm owner of SkyRae. It's basically a very small company. I do consulting and productions, both for media companies and working on their workflows, their media workflows and IT integrations, and as well as production technology for lots of brands and media companies. And my first VR experience was when I was working at Red Bull as the head of technology. We had a lot of, especially in the early phases, you have a lot of companies who were kind of emerging and looking for companies like Red Bull to sponsor VR content, and especially because at the very beginning, right, it was more of a marketing endeavor than it was an entertainment. And I can't tell you specifically what it was, but a number of companies coming in just showing like sample content on the first gen Oculus headsets.
Nice. Funny story. My company actually did post-production. If you're referring to the white helmets in 360. My company did post-production on that. So small world.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So how do you get into VR production? What was your personal story? Like, how did your company decided, you know what, we're going to do VR production?
So Stringr, we do all sorts of different content, and so we don't do a lot of currently we don't do a lot of VR, and so we don't do too much VR, but we work with clients. So if a client says we want to do a 360 or a VR type of video, then we're that company that can be the solution that can help them figure it out.
Great.
We were always interested in VR because we're kind of a technology-based company and always trying to push the edge. Our customers being primarily aerospace companies are on the bleeding edge of technology with rockets and that type of thing, and so they want their webcasts and their onboard video and crew capsules to also be high-tech. So we were looking at VR, but really the thing that thrust us into it was that we built a 53-foot Expando production trailer that did 4K 60, just with the thought of producing 4K 60 content. And as soon as the truck was built, we were approached by all these VR content producers because they needed the 4K to do that. And then we did a test recording of Empire of the Sun during Coachella in Los Angeles, and then the next actual job was Lollapalooza for Red Bull. And that was, the whole 4-day festival in VR.
Yeah, so for me personally, it would be, first would be at Red Bull when we, had a number of companies coming to us, and we really saw this as an opportunity to not only, extend the marketing, but also to have a, just a better touch point with the consumers. And something that's emerging is always, the motivation to get involved in it. Then after that, worked a lot with Jay and his team, and a number of production companies in LA that were producing around 360 VR, especially in the music space, because it's really, I think, one of the better use cases of VR, which is you're able to put these cameras in front of not only getting up and close and personal with the singer, but flipping around and seeing what it's like to be on stage and seeing the audience in certain venues is really a magical experience. So that was really what drove me to want to be involved with not only production companies, but partners like Jay at FlightLine Films, who really understand that and know how to best put that in the right spots visually, and to really drive that really good immersive experience.
Nice. So why VR? What do you think makes it different, or what makes it stand out from other kind of content, like live streaming, just in regular traditional format, I guess?
What I really love about VR is just being fully immersed totally in that realm. Whereas kind of like the traditional 16:9 fixed frame, whoever is producing that really gets the direct and the attention and where the viewer is looking. But with VR, the viewer themselves get more of a control. They can take a look around. They get to choose kind of what part of the story they get to kind of see and understand further.
Yeah, I mean, James pretty much hit the nail on the head. With a traditional production, you have a director who's choosing what your experience will be. And in some ways that's good, because the director may have insights into certain things, when the guitar solo is going to happen, or when a key event would happen in a sporting event. But if you're going to transport the viewer to that location and be there, it should be, it should be the same experience as standing on the edge watching a parade, or, I think the thing is not, at least for me, to just get them in the front row at a concert is not enough, because you can have that experience already just by purchasing a ticket in the front row. But what experience can you give the viewer that they can't get otherwise? Maybe it's flying in a space capsule, or maybe it's standing on the stage right next to the lead singer, surrounded by the drum riser and the guitars and the dancers. That's an experience that they couldn't have otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. I wouldn't try to top that. I think for me, just to talk about AR, I really am most excited probably about AR. I think entertainment is for sure the driving force, and where I think a lot of the investment initially went. But with the progress in technology, I think in education, and even in videos and demonstrations, being able to visualize something, I just saw a video recently where they took the Saturn V rocket, they showed the entire scale of the rocket, they showed you each stage and how it came apart, and what the purpose and steps of the mission were, which really are hard things to understand from just seeing historical video, right? So this allowed a really great model in a space that you could visualize, and had a volume that you could get the perspective of the heights and what the blast off looks like. So that, to me, that's really where I think these things are going. I'm also really enjoy the in-game experience. There's been a number of companies who've been trying to allow observers to be inside of the graphical scene of a video game. And I really just was really blown away by the thought of that, like conceptually being inside watching, the players go by, or the characters go by in a certain scene. I don't, if I were in the game, I wouldn't know where the heck to go in that, but there is an audience who knows where to stake things out, where to go, and to observe. So these kinds of things are where I think are the most exciting, are the things to come.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my next question. So you mentioned live music, you mentioned gaming. I'm curious to know your opinion, all of your opinions. In which sectors do you see VR lending itself best, and why? Is it education and training? Is it health? Is it journalism? Is it live music? Is it gaming?
No, I'm not really sure if there is one that I can definitively say that VR will tremendously help out, but yeah, I think it'll help out all of them in their own certain ways. Like, I think education is a huge one, as he was talking about, but also for like journalism, like taking someone from, you know, their house into another country or to just anywhere in the story is something that you can't really get through words, and you can't really get through just a traditional fixed video. Yeah, I just think education and journalism are the top two ones that I'm interested in.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think the gaming, hands down, is the best use of the VR technology. I think that's really going to give the technology legs. What Scott was talking about, I mean, I don't know about everybody else. I know esports is huge, but when I watch the screen and it's the FPV of the player and they're running around with the gun, it's frenetic, you know, colors, and I really have trouble following it. But if I could be on the battlefield with, you know, my HMD looking around, now I can relate to that experience, and I'm not being forced to look left and right because the player is trying to shoot that guy and then shoot that guy. So I think that's a really exciting use of the technology. For live events, music and parades and that type of thing, I think that's kind of a natural thing to take you to the event. What I'm really fascinated with, and I haven't really seen it executed correctly, is the storytelling in a long form narrative piece. I would be really excited to see a feature film produced in VR, and I haven't seen anything yet that pulled that off in a, I should say, revolutionary way, I guess,
Sure.
where I felt like I was having a different experience. And we've sat around and brainstormed, you know, like, can we just do a short piece that would, you know, but, you know, how do you utilize the technology where you're not just simply removing the director's vision of a close-up and a medium and a wide. Now I'm in the room with the actors, you know, observing them. But, you know, if the storytelling requires me to hear something but not see it, but I'm able to see everything, is that defeating the moment of surprise? There's just so many variables in that I don't know for sure. I hope somebody figures it out, but I don't know that VR will ever be the right tool for that type that type of thing. So I'm super, I guess, intrigued by the unknown in that portion of it.
Great.
Yeah, I agree with the guys here, obviously. I think education is huge, and even in industry, I remember seeing a very early demonstration from Intel. One of the applications was thinking of a firefighter and having a AR lens in front of his mask, right, in the glass of the mask, and that being able to project his position, the heat, the temperature, the infrared imaging to know where the heat was emanating from, if it wasn't actually obviously very visible. It also had a map of the room, right? So if there were a fire in this room, and knowing where the sprinkler heads and the valve for the where's the connection point for the water, just mapping that over the display. Really, that's where I think the applications will be life-changing. Really a technology that helps society and helps for functions, emergency services, education, during surgery. All kinds of applications of having bleeding the line between reality and computing displayed in your visual sight.
So then, as content or experience producers, if you will, what do you want users to take away from the things that you guys are producing? Like, when you come to a project, you say these are the specs of the project. What do I want the users to experience through this VR, AR, 360 video?
I'm going to start in reverse order, maybe. I'll
Sure.
go for it. Just for the heck of it.
Yeah.
I think the thing for me that in content, I've always tried to stay true to this. It's something that I've learned in my career is just staying authentic and true to the story, trying to help get the audience to relate to what you're talking about is always going to be significant and relevant, right? And that's what will attract people to content no matter what. If you're telling a story and they can feel the emotion, be in the space, understand the situation, the more you put into that effort, the more it'll translate and be accepted. So,
Yeah, I think that's key. You know, it's you have to define the experience that you want the viewer to have, and then figure out what the tools are to make that happen. You know, it's almost like when the Steadicam first came out, or the jib arm, or drones, and everybody's like, "Here's this cool new technology. Let's get that. We're going to use it." It's like, okay, well, are you just using it for the sake of the latest technology, or are you trying? Is there a reason in the story and in the experience that drives the use of that technology? And so I think a lot of people want to do VR, and you know, even some of the things that we do, I'm frustrated when there's a lot to look at over here, but there's a brick wall behind us. I don't feel like we're using VR in its full capacity, and so I think you define that. What is the experience, you know, that you want the viewer to have, and is VR the right choice? And if the answer is yes, then do it, but don't just do VR for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, I couldn't say that even better. Yeah, I think like the end goal is like, I would want the viewer to, when they finish the video, the project, to be like, wow, that was awesome. Like, I didn't even realize that I wasn't watching a normal video. I want them to have an experience and realize that that using the 360 or the VR enhance their experience, versus they can be like, oh, I just wanted to watch a regular fixed frame video. So I think, yeah, just like having the user understand it after and be like, wow, that was something I've never really experienced before. I think if you're able to achieve that, then whatever you made is a success.
So by extension from that, is there any specific examples from your work that you can say where VR, AR, 360 video was definitely the right choice versus going through like a traditional content or live stream?
So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we really don't do too much VR 360 video at the moment. So I currently don't have any projects I can speak to.
Okay.
But I'm sure these guys do.
Yeah, I mean, when we do the music festivals, you know, we have there's the relations with the artists, and some people don't want equipment up on the stage, and you try to explain to them, you know, this is what we're trying to achieve, and it requires us being kind of up close and intimate. And some artists, they want all the cameras out there where they're used to seeing them, and that kind of is counterproductive. That first concert we did with Empire of the Sun, those guys got it right away, and like the cameras were right next to people. We had one right on the drum riser, and I was so happy. That was our first foray into producing a big VR project. I thought, wow, if they're all like this is going to be amazing. And they weren't all like that. You know, the Macy's Parade, which we've done 2 years now, it's a neat use of the technology that you can choose what you look at, and you can look up and see the floats. But really the one camera that stands out is the wireless camera that's on the Tom the Turkey float, and you can look up, you're on the float moving down the street. And to me, that's one of those really cool things that you can't experience any other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the productions, I think probably all of them, have been simultaneous live 2D and 3D, 360 productions. So we've done them in parallel. We try to pick the projects like music festivals, like a parade, or a live sporting event, and try to use the 360 in a position that would drive the most interest. I think in sports, you can think of many different examples. The goal line camera, the over the basket in basketball, right? I think you try to pick the spot that is significant for the event that you're working on. Horse racing. If you had something at the Kentucky Derby this weekend, it would have been a great spot, right, to pick up on what was happening. I think it takes really clever producers and that interaction between the editorial team and the technical team to execute something and to get ahead of the storytelling. Because again, it is driven by the knowledge that you have of the sport or the event to get yourself the best experience for the consumers.
Is VR a fad? Or do you think it's here to stay, and why?
I mean, it's interesting to think that it is a fad, because 3 or 4 years ago at NAB, they had this huge VR pavilion, and everyone was sitting in the chair, spinning around.
Yep, I remember.
And then these past few years, there's no VR pavilion.
I noted that, yes.
Barely any VR going on. So and seeing that, and especially that kind of show, it's so big. You in the back of your mind, you're like, all right, maybe it is a fad. Maybe it is fading. Maybe people aren't that interested in it. But I just think we need to see proper applications of it.
Sure.
And maybe more mass adoption for the consumers. And then maybe in the next 5 years or so, it'll be more prevalent.
Okay.
But yeah, right now, I don't want to say it's a fad, but it might be.
Sure.
I mean, we've seen 3D come and go I don't know how many times now, and I get excited about 3D myself because I like anything that's immersive or can more faithfully recreate, reality. But it just doesn't work. People don't want to wear the glasses. The gamers definitely are fine wearing the HMDs. I would say 100% for sure VR has staying power in gaming.
Sure.
As far as live event coverage, I don't know. I personally am frustrated that we produce these gorgeous pictures, and on the equirectangular displays in the truck, there's deep blacks and vibrant colors, and it looks amazing. And then I take a phone I bought at Walmart and stick it in a thing on my head 2 inches in front of my face, and it doesn't look the same.
Sure.
If people are gonna buy into this and you want them to have an immersive experience, it has to be very close to reality, and I can't see the screen door of the display, and things can't be gray and washed out, and I can't be looking through a portal, because in real life I can see both Scott and James in my peripheral vision right now. So you have to get all this equipment working like that, and then people will say, oh yeah, this is just like Ready Player One. I'm in this world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just pick up on Jay. So 3D was something we saw 6 years ago come through, the industry, and lots of people got excited about it. Lots of money was invested, lots of proposals, and I'd say ultimately, yes, it was a fad to a degree, but there was something that was discovered, which was, with the increase in processing power and the power of computers, you're able to actually take make a calculation of what the second camera the offset would have been for your ocular distance, and you could rather easily convert a film into 3D without needing a whole second crew and needing to do a tremendous investment on the production. So that I think was a valuable exercise, right? And as we progress in computing power, what we're going to see that's possibility with VR, it may not be like Jay said, in your headset at home, but there are experiences, and AR is not going away. It's something that just even beyond entertainment adds to the human experience. So I don't think it's a fad for that very reason alone. To me, and one of the things I'm really looking forward to is, and you may have seen commercials. I think Seth Rogen had a commercial where he puts on a headset and he's experiencing a concert, and he's with his buddy. He's having this funny conversation. It turns out they're both in the headset in different areas, experiencing a thing together. And I think there really needs to be advancement in the connective technology, right? Maybe it's something with 5G. When all these things converge, you start having these use cases where that's something you'd want to do with your friends, right? You'd want to connect. You don't want to just sit in a room by yourself with a headset on and like, I don't care, how young you are. That's not really a fun experience. And so to me, that's where I think you'll start seeing a tipping point in the technology and the use of the technology. I think we were a little bit on the bleeding edge, and I know working with the brands that I've worked with, we made an investment in R&D to see where these things could go. It's really up to the audience, right? Like what the audience accepts and demands, that's what's going to be the case. So.
And one thing that we should throw in is, like, we're discussing kind of pie in the sky ultimate immersive experience with the HMD. 90% of the people that watch our events are just holding their phone or an iPad and using it as a window into the world. And in that case, you don't have high expectations for transporting the person. You're simply giving them a new way to choose what they look at. I want to look at the balloon, or I want to look at the lead singer or the guitar player, and that's a less challenging method, and we found over 90% of our viewers are actually watching these events in that manner. So, I think all of us, we want to come up with the most revolutionary science fiction-like, experience, but the name of this is the session is 360, and so 360 is a little different than virtual reality.
So we've talked about creative challenges, what sort of kind of defines a great VR experience. We've talked about the technology available, what sort of how users are consuming this content. What would you have to say is the most important thing that needs to happen for VR, AR, 360 video to become more mainstream, for people to have it more accessible to them, be able to actually do a more elevated experience, like putting on an HMD, as opposed to just like doing this with your phone? Is it a creative thing? Is it a technological thing? Is it a combination of both?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a combination of both. As Jay mentioned, like the headsets are huge. They can be uncomfortable. They can itch you. People get dizzy. They feel sick. But then also, like if you put on a headset and you watch something that's boring, you just take it right off after 10 seconds. So I think you have to find that perfect mix of an interesting experience or an awesome story to tell and have a reason to use 360 or VR. But then you also want to have that hardware that can display it properly, have it look good, and give you the experience that the creator is trying to give you.
Yeah, I guess if Oculus or HTC Vive or any of these companies make an amazing headset that gives you that dynamic range and the color and the field of view, that'll be an amazing thing, but I won't carry that with me all the time. So I understand what the idea was with the mobile device. You have that thing with you, and if you can snap it into some little folding thing and put it on your head, it's available all the time. It really feels like a niche still, and it's almost like the people that had the early home theaters in their house. Very few people had those, and they bought the Laserdisc player because VHS sucked, and they had this clunky 3-tube projector, and they had to calibrate it every morning. But they were willing to make that sacrifice for the experience, and so I think for VR to take off, it can't just be these extreme hobbyists who are willing to plug things into their computers and have all the sensors and all of that. And like James was saying, a lot of times when we stick the phone in the Google Cardboard and you hand it to somebody, they get disoriented and they feel nauseous, and it's like you can't do that. Just like 3D gave people headaches, and a lot of people didn't like that experience. It needs to progress past that.
Yeah, I personally, I picture a Star Trek scene where you walk into a room like this and all the walls become displays and you are in an experience there, right? So like, I really think down the road with this stuff, like technology is not here right now to have that experience, or it would be very expensive to simulate it. But I think just again that the prices of bandwidth and computer processing power just continue to go down, right? That just keeps driving what is possible. And ultimately, it's not up to us. I mean, I really can't say that more firmly. It's really up to, what's frictionless for the consumer, what do they want and demand, and the second they see it and they love it, they understand it in a second, that's the end of it, right? I don't think they've seen that yet, and I do think it's coming, right? So I think it's one of those things where, at least I consider my endeavor is to keep pushing on the technologists to make sure that we end up with all the possibilities and let the consumers decide.
So here's a fun question. What VR experience do you want to see that would blow your mind? So for example, I'm a museum buff. I love going to museums. I would love to see AR experiences where I could do museum tours and have these graphical elements just pop out and give me Morgan Freeman sort of kind of just narrating what this piece is about, or the statue, or whatever the case may be. Or another example is GPS via AR, maybe projected onto your windshield so that I don't have to look at a phone. I can just strictly look ahead and see all these graphical elements projected at me. Do you guys have any examples of like a really cool VR AR 360 video experience that you love to see happen?
Yes.
You want to start then?
Well, two things just related. I'm sure I'll leave the aerospace stuff to Jay, because that's for sure my mind goes right away, because it's an environment where, any environment where not a lot of individuals, it's a rare breed of people that can go to. I'd like to see that. I do love your idea of the museum come to life.
Yeah.
Had worked with a partner of mine at Pixel Core. His idea was really brilliant. I think it was to really recreate battle scenes. Like, you picture going to Gettysburg and being able to see the soldiers. The North soldiers were here, and this is where this was the charge. Pickett's charge was here, and really being able to visualize that in AR. That's right? Super cool. Yeah,
I think so.
So history come to life, and that's where I think education is a really great field. Yeah.
Yeah, so the obvious one for us, is not everyone can go to space, and every astronaut has talked about, the observer effect, that time when you finally get away from Mother Earth and look out at the window, and there's no borders and no barriers, and it's just one planet and one people. There's this feeling of peace and calm that comes over them, of really just kind of the epiphany of, why are there wars, why are there this, why is there famine, why can we not just make it the best we can make it? And so there'll be a lucky few people that get to experience that here in the next couple of years as space tourism ramps up. But we've built all the systems, and there's two ways that you can do it. One is give the experience of being inside the crew capsule, and with 6DOF you can lean towards the window and actually see the window coming close to you and looking out. And we've also done it where we eliminate the vehicle completely, and you're just literally floating in space as you would be an astronaut in a suit, and everywhere you look there's an unobstructed view of the planet below you and the sun above you.
I love that.
And so that properly executed, I think, is going to be one of the most exciting things we can do.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was going to say anything in space. It was kind of like watching SpaceX launch Spaceman with the Roadster out into space. Like, watching that was pretty cool. So like anything in space, on the space station, because I'm not going to be an astronaut anytime soon. So yeah, I'd love to see that, or the history stuff brought to life, or as you mentioned, like the vehicle HUDs. I'm excited for any and all of it, really.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess that kind of perfectly leads into my second to last question: is what is the future of VR? What do you think will happen in a few years, maybe in the distant future? I know you mentioned some sort of Star Trek, go into the room and this whole experience pops up. Like, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I think that is, I think a lot of people are leaning towards, everything's mobile, it's all mobile. Kids can't afford and don't want screens. They don't control the screens in their home. But I think that's a temporary thing. I think once you get into the environment of your home, however the size of it, having a home display or having an entertainment center will always be part of that. So I do believe that that's, there'll be a room where you consume all of your entertainment in your house. It'll be part of your house. It may be your kitchen, but it will be there, and it will have all the sound and all of the bandwidth that you need to make it work.
Yeah, I think however whatever the delivery format is, if you're wearing an HMD or if you're in a dedicated room, it needs to be stereo because that's how we see. It should not be a mono dome that I'm in. It should have the resolution that the human eye can resolve. It should have the same contrast that the human eye can resolve, and then it'll be an immersive experience.
Well,
Yeah, I completely agree with both the guys that just said. There's obviously going to be an advancement in the consumer heads-up displays, and even just like on like the mobile devices themselves. But I think the future of VR, as Scott was saying, is going to be this fully immersive. You walk into a room, you have the proper projection or the screens. You're going to have the proper audio system to give you that fully surround sound. It's kind of like the escape room that you can walk into now. You play this escape room. It's going to be something similar to that, where you walk in and you're interacting with that environment, fully submerged, fully immersed in that.
And your friends
experience.
have to be able to appear
exactly,
in the room with you and put together a virtual.
Ready Player One.
Yep.
yeah.
Right.
The real thing.
So
Exactly.
like a lot of places now, like a lot of strip malls have like those collective VR experiences where everyone's just standing around going like this. But yeah, once you create an environment where you and your friends can walk in and like the door closes or whatever, and you're in that experience together, I think that's going to be the future.
Nice. So my last question is, great, I came out to this panel, I'm excited, I'm in, I want to produce VR content. Where do I start?
Start with an idea.
Okay.
Think about why you want your idea to be in VR or 360. Who's your audience? Who are you trying to create this video for? You can start small. You don't have to go crazy and buy like massive rigs. Like the Insta360 One X is like this awesome little camera for like $500. I think that's a good start. And so yeah, I think it starts with the idea and your why.
Yeah, definitely the why. I mean, you have to define the experience and be honest with yourself. Does VR really support this idea? Is this the best way, or is traditional television or filmmaking the better way? But if it is VR, we always try to push the envelope and always try to come up with something fresh that nobody's seen. And so I think for content creators that are entertaining the idea of doing VR, try to brainstorm, have a rally session with everybody, and say, hey, what idea is tailor-made for the VR experience that can only be that you can only experience it that way through VR. And then once you've done that, like standing on the stage and choosing where you look, that's something that was not common until recently.
I think if I'm being honest, I would probably really talk to each individual if they came to me and said, "Do you think I should do this?" Because the fiscal model for doing a lot of these events is not really there. It's been proven out through a lot of partnerships have just gone away. A lot of them were driven by companies that were pushing their technology. And so pumping some money to produce these things. So I don't think it's a magic window into an audience. But if you're very vested in the future and doing R&D and talking to an audience that is there, it just may not be the hugest thing in the world, then I'd say, yeah, go for it. But I think you have to be very realistic about what you will get out of an experience.
Great. I don't know if the audience has any questions.
I think one thing that Scott was talking about that very pertinent is you kind of have to think, if you're producing VR, you're kind of that eccentric art house guy, you know, that's making an independent film. Like,
Absolutely.
right now, you're not making something for the masses that's going to have huge appeal. It's going to be this very narrow thing, but you know, if you do it and you nail it, you're that kick-ass, you know, independent filmmaker who made this thing that, you know, everybody said, oh, that's a bad idea, that's not, you can't monetize that, but you know, if it's amazing, who cares?
Agreed. Oh, we have a question.
Very interesting panel. I was a little curious. The topic is 360 video, but
Yes.
a lot of the questions were around VR.
Mm-hmm.
So just curious why, but there is 360 outside VR as well. That's fine. And the second question is, some of the things you talked about clearly that the environment you get in the home with large screens and could also imagine the factory floor. We talked a lot about consumer applications, but think of someone, a Boeing factory there, building the planes, right? Or other types of complicated factory floor. What do you think about applications there?
So I'm just going to rephrase the questions for camera. The first one is, it's called a 360 view, why, but the topics of conversations were centrally around VR, and then the use of application for factory floors, etc.
Right.
I'll take a stab at that first question. I'm using VR mostly as nomenclature to encompass VR, AR, 360 video. It's not limited to just virtual reality experience where you can sort of kind of put a headset and walk around. It could also include 360 video and whatever. And I think that most of the answers that we've applied have been centrally around 360 video because that's what's most accessible today. But I know that we've also covered some other aspects like AR and true VR, like 6-stop experience.
I spoke earlier about an Intel presentation that I went to that showed a firefighter with exactly what you're talking about. Seeing a schematic come into your headset and having a situational awareness of something that doesn't exist, right? Other than looking it up on a computer and having a supercomputer, in your pocket, right? So the connectivity of those things in a display, I think is probably the most powerful application that will come out of this, 360 AR, VR, right? That's this whole topic. So yeah, I agree with you on the factory floor, for environmental health and safety issues, for being able to diagnose problems and getting the machine learning that tells you, the actuator is actually on this side. It seems like the pressure is, things that you would not be aware of other than looking for it on an interface at some point. So having that interface on your face is super interesting. I don't know, how often people will wear it, but if it's a pair of glasses, I think that works.
We use the word VR a lot,
Yeah.
but they cross over and overlap probably 70%. I mean, there is 180-degree VR. 360 to me is just the step short of the virtual reality experience. Yes, you can use your mobile device 360. You can walk into a dome and have a 360 video around you. But as far as like the factory, if you can gather not only all the optical data of an environment, but all the data period, then yes, you could have a factory where you could, if you're at Boeing, a worker can have an AR goggle and see every single conduit and control line running through the fuselage and know, oh, okay, we have this amount of space here. But that is more akin to VR, the VR AR, than I think the 360, because it is another form of reality.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what the guys have said. 360 just means, to me at least, everything around you. So whether that's VR or AR, just the whole experience of being able to kind of make your choice and look all over the place instead of just in a fixed frame. And yeah, as Jay was mentioning, like having the VR or AR on a factory floor, or even like 360 video for educational purposes. If you can, if you're staying on the floor and you can look around you and have a projection of what your final model should look like, and then take it off and then start to build from there, I think that's a possible use case. And so yeah, there's whole sorts of different applications that VR, AR, and AR can have in factories.
Any other questions?
I'm curious, the audience are there content producers and folks looking to potentially, dabble in this, or just interested in really where the technology goes?
That's a great question.
ask the
Can we get like a
audience.
show of hand? Who here has done anything in VR, AR, 360 video? Just raise your hand. Who here is interested in the potential of doing anything in VR, AR, 360 video?
Hopefully everyone.
You don't have to if you don't want to.
Yeah, well, hopefully this is, we were trying to guide it into, a little bit into the future, what's possible now, and we're around for questions after. But yeah, it's always hard to gauge where you think the answers should go based
Absolutely.
on who's in the audience.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank again our panelists, James, Jay, Scott. I'd like to thank again LiveX for all their assistance. Thank you guys for coming out, and yeah, have a great rest of the show.